tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings and good evening to you all. This weekend, some of us from Buddha Bodhivana Monastery in Melbourne have come down to Bodhipala Monastery in Mount Pleasant, South Australia, to visit Ajahn Kalyano and the Sangha and lay community here. As is our tradition, as fellow Buddhist monastics, like a family, we visit each other from time to time because there's interest in Buddhism all over the place now, all over Australia, all over the world. And so more and more Buddhist monasteries, temples, hermitages are growing, being established and growing up in many different places. And so when there's a connection, then we often visit each other to support each other in the practice. When I first became interested in Buddhism, I was about 16, so it was a long time ago now. I couldn't find any kind of address or contact of a Buddhist center or temple. Perhaps I didn't try so hard, I was only 16. But in those days there wasn't the internet. There was a telephone directory. Remember those big books that they used to deliver to your mail box? I couldn't find much in there. So, because I had an interest in meditation and Buddhism, from that time, I could find a few books. So I read a few books, and then I was fortunate. I saw the Buddhist or the BBC's documentary on Lumpur Cha called The Mindful Way, which you can now see on YouTube. Just by chance, I didn't even know it was on. I just happened to be near a television screen when that came on and saw it. So that was my good fortune. And I saw Ajahn Chah, and something clicked in my mind. I said, yes, this is it. Seeing Buddhist monks walking mindfully for alms in the local village in Ubon, northeast Thailand, where Ajahn Chah lived. It gave me a sense of hope, because until then, even though I was young, I was very inexperienced with the world, but I had this sort of idea that maybe the Buddhist teachings can help us to live a good life. And I even had the thought of going to try out living in a Buddhist monastery, but I didn't know where. And so seeing that documentary gave me some hope. And the thought that, I'd had a doubt that maybe Buddhism was just an ancient religion from Eastern Asia, 2,500 years old, and maybe not so relevant to modern culture, and maybe not possible really to practice it, certainly not to become a Buddhist monk. That was my initial thought, but then seeing Ajahn Chah and his Sangha practicing in the forest in a very traditional way, living very simply, keeping the rules of training, practicing meditation, mindfulness in the forest, I realized, it's possible. People are living like this, even though they were living a long way away. So that kind of heartened me at that time and encouraged me to keep on reading, studying. And then later I joined a meditation group and met some teachers who had been in Thailand practicing meditation with some well-known teachers, which further gave me the kind of confirmation that it's possible in this day and age to practice. And then eventually I met with Ajahn Chah his monastery, his Sangha, and realised, oh, there was actually one monastery Ajahn Sumedho had started in the UK, but it had only just begun. Now, literally, all over the world, there are Buddhist places, not just in the Ajahn Chah tradition, but in many other Buddhist traditions. I don't think you could say Buddhism is taking over the world. You look at the behaviour of many people in the world, maybe they're certainly not following the Buddhist path. I'm not sure what path they're following. But at least the opportunity is there for those who are interested to learn about the Buddhist teachings and practice. Sometimes online now, maybe it's too much, isn't it? Where do you start? People are always asking me, where do I start? There's so many teachers, teachings, techniques, styles, so many books, so many writings. There's quite a lot to wade through, probably more than you could wade through in one lifetime. So sometimes you have to make choices and just see what go with your heart, maybe. Again, I was fortunate. My heart said Ajahn Chah is a very good teacher. I just felt that, and then went with him. And then not very long after that, he passed away, which, just had to accept that. But luckily enough, I did live and meet him and practice in his Sangha while he was still alive for a few years. Enough to get some grounding, some understanding of what he was teaching, which only confirmed my initial thoughts was that, oh yes, this is a very wise, peaceful person who knows what he's talking about. And I think that still shines through in his teachings, even the translated teachings, which aren't in his original language, say the ones in English. But still, the wisdom, the depth of wisdom, the compassion, the understanding of the human condition just shines through all the time from his teachings. And then also you've got the living example of sanghas, of monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen all over the world practicing, who are also confirming that, there's something good here. But something Ajahn Chah emphasized a lot is that we have to practice and know for ourselves. Buddhism is not simply a belief system where you say, I'm Buddhist because I believe in the Buddha, I believe in his teachings, on karma or the Four Noble Truths. That's not enough. That may be a starting point. And we all start somewhere. So maybe just an intuition or a feeling that, this makes sense, it's good. That's a good place to start. But the encouragement Ajahn Chah gave, and we believe the Buddha gave, is for us as human beings to investigate the truth through our own experience. And the way of practice is about developing the tools, the skills, the awareness, the understanding to do that, to learn to be able to reflect back and become more aware of our bodies and minds, how they are, and in particular, how stress and suffering in our minds and in our experience arises, and then what we can do about it, to end it, reduce it and end it. So Ajahn Chah's teachings have that flavour of always encouraging us to come back and look at ourselves as we're going about our life, whether we're living in a monastery as a monastic, or whether we're at home or working as a layperson, whatever. The encouragement is to learn to come back and look at yourself from day to day, moment to moment through your day as much as possible, to observe what's going on. And with this particular emphasis on looking at where suffering arises in our hearts, in our condition, and then what can we do to end it. So that's why you might say I'm here today in Bodhipala Monastery. This place was started as a place where people can come and learn how to do this, develop some of these tools and skills. If you want to give it a name, you might call it the Eightfold Noble Path. It is what the Buddha taught that leads to the end of suffering, the end of stress for human beings. It's an offering to the world that the Buddha gave, left with us, being handed down from generation to generation, particularly by monastics who have a certain duty to kind of preserve the teachings through the practice and through preserving the principles of the practice, good practice, but also the lay community has their role as well. And it's come right down to today, so to this place, this time, this place in South Australia. It's just one other part of the Buddhist community, you could say, and it's a place where you can come and practice the Buddhist teachings. So I would say that's our good fortune, having a place like this here. So I encourage it, come and visit and support it. And I hope you and others benefit from its presence. But the emphasis on the practice, and we have to learn how to practice for ourselves, because the true benefits appear in our own hearts and minds. That's the challenge. If it is just a belief system, I believe in the Buddha, then you can kind of stop there. And someone asks you, oh, do you have a religion? Yeah, I have a religion, I'm a Buddhist. And what does that mean? Well, I believe the Buddha is good. The Buddha was a good person, made sense. Okay, but what do you do? And sometimes it stops there, doesn't it? And, we're not so good at explaining that. But perhaps a good starting point is the Four Noble Truths about suffering and its causes and its end and the path of practice that leads to its end. So what the Buddhists do, as opposed to what the Buddhists believe in, well, what Buddhists do is cultivate the Eightfold Noble Path, because that's what the Buddha taught. So you're probably already familiar with that. The Eightfold Path starts with right view, right thought, right livelihood, right action, right speech, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. So these are 8 different factors that we are cultivating simultaneously through our lives if we're following the Buddha's teaching. So like Ajahn Chah used to say, the starting point really is samadhi. This is wisdom. Sometimes people come and ask you, what should I practice first in Buddhism? What should I do? Well, gain some wisdom. And the only way to gain wisdom is hearing the teachings. So that's why we do give talks and discussion on Buddhism. We have suttas and commentaries on the suttas. We have texts. These are ways we first of all gain wisdom, what we call the pariyatti, or the formal name is Suttamaya Panya. Wisdom you gain from listening, learning, studying. And there's probably no way around that. You have to listen and gain at least a basic understanding of what the framework of the teachings is, what are the things we have to do and cultivate. Just like anything else in life, any branch of knowledge or skill, you have to start somewhere. You have to get the theory, absorb some of that. Some people are very dedicated and learn and study a lot. And it depends on your character, doesn't it? I knew one monk who read the entire Buddhist canon, all the many volumes of the Buddhist suttas and the Vinaya and the Abhidhamma, from cover to cover in a 3-month retreat. He said basically he didn't sleep. But he said that was because he was so inspired. He had so much joy reading the words of the Buddha, contemplating them. It just kept him awake. So he slept almost nothing, very little, and he just focused on reading and studying. So in that way, in a very determined way, it was almost like a kind of meditation, because he was on retreat. And he said he didn't regret that. He found it very inspiring. He didn't repeat it over and over again. He just did that once at one point in his life, but he found that very helpful. So some people become really absorbed into the study, and that may be very helpful for them. Others study at a more gentle pace, read, listen as they go along, and maybe practice meditation at the same time. That's also okay, because it depends on our character, and everyone's character is a little bit different. But the main way we begin to learn and absorb what the Buddha taught has to come from some external source, so either reading or hearing talks. But then also we have to bring it in. What we have read, heard, we have to bring it in and contemplate it. So, you start sounding like a school teacher, but there's no way around it. The human mind works like this. What you hear with your ears or see with your eyes, what happens to it? It's information that you have no choice. You have to bring it into your brain and your mind and start processing what you've heard. So in Buddhism we have a tradition, there's a lot of memorization. So like chanting, we just did chanting of various reflections on the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, teachings on impermanence, sharing merit, verses of sharing and aspiration and so on. Many talks, teachings, reflections that we chant or learn with, and we bring them into our heart and we start reflecting on them a second time, like contemplating the meaning, and sooner or later you'll find teachings that mean something to you, that have a certain resonance with you. They have a certain resonance that brings up certain good qualities that inspire you and make sense. One thing leads on to another. So hearing the teachings, contemplating them, maybe you learn some new things, maybe you just hear things that you've heard before, but it just reminds you. And you'll notice, say, just with something like listening to a talk or reading a book or chanting reflections, there'll be sometimes you do it and it doesn't seem to go in at all, and it doesn't seem to mean much to you, and your mind is kind of blank or distracted, just thinking of other things, and it sort of seems like, nothing happened there. And then other times maybe it just clicks. Your mind is in the right mood, your body is in the right state, your mind is in the right mood, the conditions are right, and you might just read a little bit of Dhamma or hear a bit or chant a verse, and straight away it goes into your heart and seems to really have a good effect. Maybe it kind of wakes you up to some aspect of the truth that you haven't remembered or missed or never thought of before, just because the conditions are right. And we say this is the Dhamma arising in your heart, where what you've heard and learned now is actually coming up in your heart as more something that really means something to you. And it may trigger other good responses. So you reflect on something and then it maybe makes sense, the mind brightens. Maybe at that moment you let go of some of the negativity or the distractions that you might have in your mind. And you seem to get something from it that stays. It doesn't just pass away from your mind, something stays. You might call it an insight, an understanding, an awareness has arisen. And together with that, you get a sense of joy, maybe. The mind, because it's letting go of other more negative, mundane states of mind, it feels more relaxed, get some joy, what we call piti and sukha arise. But all the conditions have to be there, so it's not necessarily something you can just turn on or turn off. Maybe if you're very advanced in the practice, you can. But in the beginning, it's more kind of, you have to cultivate it. It's a bit like, doing gardening or growing crops. Some years the conditions are not right, things are not working, it doesn't grow. Like some years we've planted trees here and, the rain doesn't come, the trees wilt and die. And you just have to accept that. But then other times the rain comes and the soil is there, the kangaroos don't eat the trees and they grow. The Dhamma is a bit like that, the causes and conditions have to be right. And so there's many aspects to the practice. We hear the Dhamma, we bring it in, we practice, and we have to kind of have that sense of nurturing the heart, cultivating the heart, developing maybe a number of different qualities. So one thing the Buddha encourages, respect the teachings, respect the practice. Because if you're giving it respect, you're giving it meaning, value in your life. You're saying, this is something important, this is something can help me, this is something can help improve my life. You have that kind of attitude towards it, well, then there's a chance the Dhamma can grow from the sort of first seeds of hearing talks or chanting or reading. those seeds grow into something a bit more substantial. So it's about nurturing the right causes and conditions, respect for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, giving it importance, value, an interest to learn, to understand, that will lead us on to pursue the practice more, be patient with some of the obstacles. If you want to learn something, there'll be times where it's frustrating because you don't know, or you think you know and then you realize you didn't know, or you just have all kinds of moods and states of mind that come up that kind of block the learning process. So you have to be very patient, have to have that sense of respect, giving value to what you're involved with, the learning, the practice, the patience, and particularly the goodwill. If you see the Buddha himself, he cultivated the practice, cultivated the qualities of wisdom, mindfulness, compassion, and then that motivated him to teach others. And it also we need it to motivate ourselves. We have to have a sense of compassion. I want to do something for myself to overcome suffering, reduce my own experience of pain, suffering in my life, and maybe even also help others as well. So there has to be some goodwill and compassion there. So there are a number of different qualities that come together to help you as you practice the Dhamma. And some of them may be present, some are missing, and so that may explain why sometimes the Dhamma makes sense and it makes you peaceful and it seems to be clear and your mind becomes bright. Then other times, some of the factors are missing and it doesn't come together and the Dhamma doesn't seem to be very close at all. But this is what we're learning as we practice. We're learning about ourselves and bringing the Dhamma into our hearts and seeing how we can cultivate it. So one aspect of the path that's vital to that is the development of what we call right effort, samma vayama. Because we all know we have to put effort into things in life. Meditation takes effort, building monasteries takes effort, learning chanting, learning meditation techniques takes effort. But we want to make sure our effort is going in the right direction. So the Buddha's guidelines here are right effort, and that's the effort to prevent unwholesome mind states coming up and taking over your mind. So unwholesome mind states, that's thoughts and mental states and intentions rooted in greed, anger and delusion, and all their offshoots, all their children. Because when they come up, they cloud the mind, they take away our wisdom, our clarity, they distract us, they make the mind, in short, unhappy. When greed takes over your mind, you're discontent. When anger takes over your mind, you're discontent, you're stirred up. So the effort, the first of the right efforts, is to prevent those kind of mind states arising. That takes some thought, doesn't it? It takes some consideration. How do I avoid or prevent unwholesome mind states coming up and taking over my mind? Well, maybe one thing is to reflect on previous times when they did come up and take over your mind. You failed before, you made a mistake and got angry, or greed was besieging your mind. You got obsessed with something or addicted with something, or just your desires were leading you into some kind of mental suffering. You've seen it before, so reflecting on what you've seen before, you're aware of the dangers and the problems that may lie ahead, so then you start thinking about that in your life, and that could be in your daily life, with family, with work, wherever, or in the monastery. You become aware of situations or people that you're likely to get caught into more unwholesome ways of acting, speaking or thinking when you're with those people or in those situations maybe that produce fear, or say, for example, say you have to go to the doctor. You've got a sore throat and a fever, maybe it's COVID. So you've got the fear of COVID-19 comes up in your mind. What does preventing that arising mean there? Does it mean you don't go to the doctor and get checked? Maybe you should still go to the doctor, but you have to look at your fears and think it through to see, these fears are not helping. They're overwhelming my mind, what you might call a negative mind state. How can I prevent them arising? And sometimes you need to get more information, Maybe that simply means going and getting checked if you've got COVID and you get your test done. Oh, no COVID, okay. That could be done as a practice of right effort. By getting more information, you're preventing your mind falling into fear or despair. Or maybe there's somebody you know that when you're with them, you're likely to become careless in your speech or your actions, get angry. So sometimes right effort there might simply mean avoiding those people if you can. If you can't avoid them, what do you do? Well, you have to establish your mind to be very careful around that person, how you relate to them, how you speak, because you know you may get caught into anger or irritation with them or say something you regret. So you've already thought ahead, oh, last time I had an argument with this person, so next time I better watch myself, watch what I say, be careful. So you've got a strategy, a plan of action to avoid your mind falling into unwholesome states. You've already prepared yourself and made some kind of plan. Or you might say, if I'm with somebody and I do get angry or upset, what will I do then? And you've already thought it through. Maybe you couldn't stop anger arising. So that's the second right effort. It's like the effort to abandon unwholesome, unskillful states that have arisen. Sometimes we're not aware, and so it's arisen. You're caught into greed, anger, confusion, fear, worry, whatever. What will I do when that happens? So again, sometimes we have to think things through, contemplate, well, what's the best thing to do when I get angry? Maybe walk away, maybe button up my mouth, walk away, grit my teeth, wait until I'm more calm and then go back and discuss the problem or have something to do with that person. We have to think things through, so at least we've got some kind of option. That would be the best, wouldn't it? How to practice right effort in the very time, the very moment when you have got angry, or you're confused, or anxiety has taken over you, what should you do? And you have a few strategies in place. Maybe go away and meditate on the thought of loving kindness to calm you down, or the breath. Maybe look for a friend at that time that you're very emotional, upset. Maybe see a trusted friend to help give you some advice when you can't think straight and help to clear your mind. There's many different things you could do, but you would call this the practice of right effort, having a strategy ready for when you fall into an unskillful mental state. So you've got the effort to abandon, the effort to prevent them arising in the first place, the effort to abandon. The other two kinds of right effort are more on the positive side, the effort to cultivate, bring up wholesome mind states. And that can be, in a way, these efforts work together. So sometimes you can prevent anger arising by already focusing on goodwill and patience and tolerance. Or if you have got ill will or confusion or fear arising, then you turn your mind to bring up a wholesome state. It's quite difficult, but it can be done. Or other times, you don't wait till the unwholesome state arises. You're just doing your practice. You've got time. You're either meditating or just contemplating your practice and bringing up wholesome states in the course of your day. Consciously looking for skillful ways of thinking and skillful attitudes to bring up that bring you some peace in that moment, maybe even some joy, some happiness, and also are conducive to more wholesome states arising. So bring up more mindfulness, more contemplation, using your mind to contemplate the Dhamma. The Buddha encouraged us to recollect good things that we've done in our life, because it brings joy. So sometimes you're just driving the car going somewhere to work or something, and you may be tempted to be in a more unmindful, unwholesome state. So you consciously bring your mind to contemplate the Dhamma at that moment. Recollect some of the good things you've seen in your life, other people doing, some of the good things people have done to you, some of the good things you've done. Just as a wise, good, skillful contemplation at a time, and it uplifts the mind in a very mundane, ordinary situation. That would be called right effort. bringing up a wholesome state of mind. You're reflecting on an act of kindness that you received or that you've done for somewhere else, for example. And in that moment, you're bringing up those reflections. You feel relaxed, calm, happy. That would be the practice of right effort. The last practice of right effort is developing those skillful mental states that have already arisen. So, continuing them, keep going. So maybe in meditation, you're meditating and you brought up some mindfulness. Ajahn Chah used to say, the hardest thing to do is not bring up mindfulness, it's to keep the mindfulness there that you've already developed. Put effort maybe to sit meditation for a period of time, and as soon as you finish, the tendency is for the mind to turn off, isn't it? And say, that's it, I've done my meditation, what next? Turn on the TV, pick up the phone, talk to your friend, and it all disappears. The mindfulness goes, whatever insight you were developing goes. So the fourth right effort is probably the hardest of them all, is to maintain skillful states, skillful attitudes, skillful mental states, maintaining them and build on them. So, particularly when you practice meditation, keeping mindfulness going after you finish meditating, coming back to the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma. So often they say, when do you learn most about your meditation? It's after you've finished. You contemplate what went on in your meditation period. How much effort did you put in? What states of mind were you experiencing? What worked? What didn't? What brings you joy? What brings your mind to feel more calm, more relaxed? What ways of thinking, what attitudes help you? Reflecting back on that is also a way of maintaining skillful states of mind. Another one is, having the patience to keep going with things in life. So, say you help somebody, you've been helping somebody in some way, and maybe they don't respond very well, maybe they're ungrateful or troublesome or difficult because of their character. You might be tempted to give up and say, waste of time, or I can't be bothered. But maybe at that moment you also say, but that is a more negative mind state. I'll continue helping in whatever way I can, as long as it's not harming me, harming them, and you just keep yourself going. Keep developing, say, the goodwill or the generosity in that particular situation, not giving up on the good actions that you've already developed. Or it could be the practice of precepts, being mindful of actions and speech. You notice sometimes we maybe have previously determined to keep precepts, and then at some point we say, I can't be bothered. I don't care. Whatever I'm going to say, it doesn't matter. Or whatever I'm going to do, it doesn't matter. We give up on our previous determination. And all the teachers I've lived with and found very, have practiced well and give good advice, they all encourage this quality of maintaining, the term may be not easy to describe exactly, but the term is satcha. Satcha barami is like being true to your goal, true to your practice, true to what you're doing, continuing through with things, to the end. So say you keep precepts and sometimes your mindfulness slips and you say something, do something that you regret, wasn't very good. But to come back, re-establish your precepts, start again. Or in meditation, to come back to your meditation object over and over again, even though the mind runs away, it's frustrating. To have satcha, to have truthfulness and to be true to what you're doing. Or helping someone, you help them through to the end. We can do that, like most families, parents will help their kids, whatever, until they're adults and maybe leave home and are helping themselves. Generally we do that. But in other situations, maybe we don't. Maybe we help someone and we get frustrated with it and give up, can't be bothered. Sometimes we maybe should push ourselves a little bit more. Say, no, I'll follow through with this, keep on with this. Or you're doing some job of work, maybe that's useful for you, for others, and sometimes we get lazy, don't we? It's tiring, you're distracted or can't be bothered, and you give up, you stop. But sometimes you have to have enough awareness to say, no, I should stick with this This is right effort, keeping going with something that's wholesome, skillful, useful for others, useful for myself. So the four right efforts are very central to our practice, but you can see they interlink with many other skillful qualities, like this quality of wisdom, mindfulness, kindness, compassion, patience, energy. And that's the way the path develops for us. We are developing many different qualities at the same time, coming up. And you'll notice when things seem to be going well in your life, and I don't mean necessarily outside, like you could say the world is not in a good place at the moment, pandemic, economy is in trouble, there's pandemic, people are suffering. So you could say, oh, the world at the moment is not so good. But your mind doesn't have to be affected by all that or brought down by all that. And you could say there are times when all these good qualities come together, even though externally there are challenges, difficulties. But it doesn't matter. You can bring up all these qualities. And you'll notice when they do come together, there's a sense of rightness in the mind. Things seem right. There may still be problems in your life, difficulties, but in the mind, things feel right. So, which is probably why they call it right view, right thought, right effort, right action. It's right. And right here means, it's partly a feeling. The emotions are balanced, happy, peaceful. Partly it's just the causal effects of what you're doing are right, in the sense they're leading to good results, the outcomes you're seeking and what you want in life. One thing leads to another. So putting effort into this, hearing the teachings, drawing them into your heart, and then reflecting on them regularly, contemplating them. Often people see the practice of Buddhism as just meditation. But, it's broader than that. There's so much more to that. You're developing the whole path, and that's wisdom, energy, effort, mindfulness, kindness, compassion, patience, so many different qualities working together. So to see that, how many different qualities develop together, have a very good outcome on the mind, and keep the mind buoyant and happy even if the world or our health or things around us are not going so well. Doesn't mean to say the mind has to be dragged down. But we have to do that work, that effort of bringing the qualities of the Dhamma in and cultivating them. What the Buddha sort of emphasized was that at the center of all this is the quality of mindfulness, because it seems to be the most useful quality we can develop in our practice, which is why we emphasize it so much. But sometimes people just take that one quality and sort of reduce everything down to just mindfulness, just be mindful. What I'm doing here is just expanding it and say, well, mindfulness is at the center of our practice, being aware, being careful, knowing yourself from moment to moment through your life, knowing your mind, knowing your body, knowing what you're doing. It's what mindfulness does for us, but it's supported by all these other qualities. And mindfulness itself will sometimes say, this is what you need to do. You need to be aware of what you're saying, what you're doing. You need to practice generosity here. You need to be patient with this problem that's arisen, and so on. Mindfulness is very much at the center of things, kind of directing what you do in your practice. So sometimes they compare it to, the manager or the CEO or the prime minister or whatever, position of responsibility and leadership. You compare it to, it's that kind of role, overseeing, governing your life, governing your mind, governing your practice. Whether you're in a practice of meditation or you're just going about your business, mindfulness is always the valuable quality that will help direct you in the right way, keep you paying attention to what you need to pay attention to. That maybe at this point, listening to a talk, or if you're meditating, coming back to the breath, or if you're driving a car, focusing on the road so you don't hit a kangaroo, or whatever it may be. It brings you to where your mind needs to be and what you need to be doing. The duty, the responsibility, the activity you're involved with, that's what it does. And so the Buddha says it's the most valuable quality we can have. When I was a young monk, they always trained us in mindfulness by saying, ask yourself what you're doing right now. Like Ajahn Chah's monastery had a sign on the wall, not on the wall, on a tree. It's a forest, so the signs are all on trees. You walk past and it says, "Hey, you, what are you doing right now?" You stop and say, I'm walking, I'm going to the eating hall, I'm going to sweep leaves. The idea is you answer yourself so you know where you are, where you're at. Why? Because our mind half the time is just daydreaming, isn't it? You walk down the street, you're not with the walking and what you're doing, your mind is already miles away, or yesterday, it's thinking about what happened yesterday, or what you're going to do next year when COVID's over and you got all your plans ready for as soon as lockdown's finished, as soon as travel is open, you're going to do all this stuff. But it's not with the walking down the street, is it? And that's why you trip over or bump into someone or things go wrong, isn't it? Because you're not mindful. So mindfulness is something to cultivate in all postures, but not in isolation. It's something that brings your attention to the present moment and then brings in other qualities and helps them to develop together, particularly wisdom. You can't see and know what's going on in your mind or in your life until you're paying attention. So you have to cultivate it, learn how to pay attention. So mindfulness holds the mind in the present moment with body and mind, what you're thinking, what you're doing. Wisdom is more that, the function of the mind that understands. At this moment I'm doing this. Is it good? Is it bad? What outcome? What results are happening from what I'm doing? Should I change? Should I stop? Should I continue? Should I do more? There's no one answer here. It's just more the quality of being reflecting on your behavior and what's going on and what's needed at that time. So they work as two friends. Mindfulness and wisdom will work together. Or they sometimes say mindfulness is like the car, wisdom is like the passenger. So the car needs to go somewhere, so mindfulness brings it there, and then wisdom is the passenger who can do whatever they're going to do once they've arrived at the place. These two qualities kind of permeate the whole of the Buddhist teachings. And even, you might say, well, you get wisdom partly from hearing the Dhamma and then thinking about it and then learning it and then knowing it, seeing it in your own experience. What does mindfulness do? Well, sometimes just mindfulness comes through also just from listening to Dhamma. It reminds you to be mindful. I know monks who write on the back of their door in their hut in the forest, "Be mindful." So they see the words, bring your attention back to the present moment, to the breath, to the body, to what I'm doing. And, it sounds so simple, but our mind runs away all the time, gets caught into its moods, its thoughts, loses track. Sometimes it's stress, suffering. Sometimes as simple as that, a sign on a door saying, "Be mindful," and it's like, come back to the present moment. So developing this path, bringing it in from hearing the Dhamma, listening, talking about the Dhamma, and then contemplating it. And ultimately, as your mindfulness does improve and you're more experienced in the practice, just seeing and knowing the Dhamma and the way things are. And probably the most commonly used tools for developing wisdom and understanding are reflecting on the three characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, not self. So we just chanted, all conditions are impermanent, are unsatisfactory, are not self. Seeing that, when mindfulness is established, seeing that in your own experience, noticing the impermanence of your physical body, how it's changing all the time. Sometimes just moment by moment, noticing, it's cool, it's hot, you have an itch, you have an ache, you eat food, you feel full, later you feel thirsty, you drink, then you're no longer thirsty. Just noticing feelings, sensations in your body, noticing the aging of the body. Sometimes we get sick, we feel tired, then we feel energized. Just noticing the physical appearance of the body. It's one area that you notice change. Noticing the change in your mind, remembering things, how things have been in the past and then today, and comparing today and last year or yesterday, or how is my mind today, how was it in the past, how will my mind be in the future, what am I expecting? Observing the changes that go on in your mind, the changing moods, the changing mental states, the changing mental experiences, thoughts arising, passing away, sense consciousness. Sometimes you're really engrossed in something and your mind is just watching, or then it's hearing, sometimes it's just thinking. Mental experience, mental activity changing all the time. Mindfulness helps hold your attention so you can see that more clearly. And you start to see recurring themes, recurring experiences that give you understanding and wisdom. Oh, your body and mind are changing, they're subject to change. And that wisdom helps to free your mind from delusions. Sometimes when you're suffering, you tend to have that feeling like strong sense of self. My life is like this. I'm angry or depressed. It's always like this. Everything is bad. You put your negative glasses on and suddenly start seeing everything in a negative way. Whereas when you establish mindfulness, you reflect on impermanence. You might say, well, at the moment I feel bad, or my thoughts are very negative. But is that always the case? And as you pay more close attention to what's going on, you notice, well, sometimes it's the case, but sometimes not. So we've all been depressed or angry or sad or afraid in the past. Where has all that gone now? It disappeared because it's impermanent. What's impermanent is not a self in the sense of a permanent you, me, you person, because it was there before, now it's gone. And you can know that in the present moment, that those mental states and experiences are impermanent because they've gone. Currently you're not experiencing them. If you're really stuck on it, you might think, but they'll return because that's me, and I'll be depressed tomorrow, I'm sure of it. But sometimes you're not feeling that way or thinking in that way. You have to notice that. Mindfulness, by paying attention, it helps you to notice that. And you grow from that. You grow in the maturity of your understanding. You say, I've seen this before, it will pass. I know this nature of this is impermanent. Even extreme pain, from illness or injuries. If you establish mindfulness, you can see that. As you meditate, sometimes you meditate for a long time, you get a lot of pain coming up, but you can notice, it arises, it passes away. One moment there's pain and then suddenly it disappears. Probably most meditators have had that experience. And you learn from that, that's insight. You say, it's impermanent. Next time you're experiencing pain, you can already have that insight ready. It's like, I know I've had this before, it may well just disappear. Without me doing anything. I don't have to get angry, upset, agitated. I'll just watch it and it may pass all by itself. So there's many things you learn as you practice the teachings, bring them in your heart, contemplate, bring out mindfulness, contemplate things. But the idea is just to get to see the way things are without adding on extra views on things, perceptions, extra mental baggage, but just knowing the way this body and mind are, that they're conditioned things, they're subject to change, and ultimately they're without solid, permanent self. Seeing your mind and body more as a process of changing conditions. That gives you insight, and it releases the mind from a lot of suffering because you're no longer identifying so strongly with all those experiences. You'll notice when you are suffering, it's because your mind is attaching and identifying my pain, my problem, my thoughts, my issues with other people, my experience of lockdown, my experience of coronavirus, my experience of the world. It's all, when you're suffering and unhappy, the sense of my is very strong. Mindfulness is weak, insight has disappeared. But when you re-establish mindfulness, you bring up the insight, you contemplate, you see the sense of self starts to reduce down. Ajahn Chah used to say, it's like this big inflatable doll or person. And then insight is, you establish mindfulness, contemplate, see, it's all a bit impermanent, it's not as real as I thought, and it's like pulling the air stopper out and and it goes down, doesn't it, very quickly sometimes. Before your eyes, that angry person just shrinks back down to not angry, normal. the mind full of desires and things, and then disappointments because the desires are not met. Big issue in the mind, big sense of self suddenly, like a balloon, or this air doll shrinks down. That's what clarity and insight does, doesn't it? It sees through the delusions of self, the identification with body and mind as this big solid thing, which only makes us more anxious, and brings us more suffering. So use it. This is the benefit of the teachings. They help you to actually see things as they are, not just belief, not just theorizing, but actually seeing in your experience and changing your mind by educating it, by learning the Dhamma from experience, not just from the books now. Your mind becomes happier because you're more in touch with reality. They always say, oh, you go to the monastery, you're escaping the real world. You're just going into this kind of false heavenly kind of retreat where you don't have to face any problems in the world. But it's not true, because your mind and body go with you wherever you go. So even in a monastery, it's still the real world. You still have a mind full of doubts and worries and ups and downs and greed and anger and happiness and sadness. It's all there. But maybe a monastery sometimes is a good place to go because you get a quiet opportunity to really look at these things. And you see the real world is actually this quality of knowing the way things are, the mind of mindfulness, wisdom, functioning well, seeing, it's like this. Whereas the unreal world out there is the world of mental constructions, our dreams and hopes and daydreams, which get built up and then crushed, the ups and downs of life and all our mental behavior, reactions to things. That's what we think of as the real world. But actually it's more a make-believe world, isn't it? The world of moods, opinions, views, more superficial world. The real world is just the mind that sees, things arise, things pass away. It's like this. Anyway, maybe enough from me tonight, giving you some reflections on the Dhamma practice. Hopefully something was useful in there, but I wish you all the best for the new year, and encourage you all to keep up your practice of generosity, morality, developing mindfulness, cultivating wisdom. I would say that would be the best thing to do this year, is put your effort into the Dhamma practice, and it should only bring you more understanding, more peace, more happiness, and I wish you that. So.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.